When you think of the ancient Maya, what comes to mind? For most of us, it's master astronomers, right? A civilization of geniuses tracking the heavens, building these mind-blowing pyramids, and creating one of the most complex calendars ever. And you're not wrong. But today, we're going to look at one of their most iconic creations and find out that it was so much more than just a fancy way to tell time.
Okay, so take a look at this. What you're seeing is something called an E group. This one is from a site called Usaktun, and it's the very first one ever identified. Now, for the longest time, archaeologists thought its job was obvious. It was a huge, beautiful stone calendar. But, as we're about to see, that simple idea is just the tip of the iceberg. It hides a much deeper story about how the Maya literally built their entire world.
So let's start with that first theory, because it really is elegant and, super captivating. How exactly did this massive pile of rocks supposedly work as a perfect solar clock?
First off, what even is an E group? Well, the basic layout is pretty much always the same. You've got a main pyramid on the western side of a big plaza. And from there, you look across to a long platform on the eastern side. And on top of that platform, there are 3 smaller buildings. It's this very specific arrangement that was thought to be the key to the whole thing.
And this, right here, this is the aha moment. When archaeologists first mapped out that E group at Waksetun, they realized that if you stood on the Western Pyramid, the sunrises on the most important days of the year lined up perfectly with those 3 Eastern temples. It was an astronomical bullseye.
Let's walk through it. Okay, picture it. You're standing on top of that Western Pyramid before dawn. On the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the sun pops up right behind that northern temple. On the winter solstice, the shortest day, bam, it rises behind the southern one. And on the equinoxes, in the spring and fall, you guessed it, right behind the middle temple. It's so clean, so perfect, it really felt like, okay, case closed. This is a solar observatory.
But in archaeology, if a story seems just a little too perfect, it probably is. As researchers started finding more and more of these structures, some pretty serious cracks started to appear in that whole perfect solar clock idea.
And this was the first huge problem. I mean, if this was a standardized astronomical tool, you'd expect them all to point the same way, right? But they didn't. Archaeologists started finding them all over the Maya world, and their alignments were all just a little bit different. A lot of them weren't nearly precise enough to actually work as an observatory.
And the thing is, we're talking about a massive scale here. E-groups weren't just a one-off thing at Uaxtoctun. As you can see from this map, they were everywhere. It was a common feature in Maya cities all the way from Guatemala up into Mexico and Belize. This wasn't just an observatory, this was a full-blown cultural phenomenon.
So the evidence just wasn't adding up. A lot of these E-groups were, well, they were kind of sloppy. And even that perfect site at Uaxtoctun, turns out it had a fatal flaw. Its main pyramid and the eastern platform were built in different centuries, so they couldn't possibly have been used together for precise observations. And all those different orientations suggested they were probably tracking other things, maybe local dates important for farming.
All of this forced researchers to basically go back to the drawing board. The idea of a simple solar observatory just wasn't cutting it anymore. The thinking shifted. It wasn't a scientific instrument, it was a sacred stage. It wasn't just for watching the stars, it was a blueprint for how to build a community, a place where the calendar, religion, and power all smashed together.
So if it wasn't just a giant clock, what was it for? Well, the answer turns out to be way more profound. This wasn't just a plan, it was the original blueprint for a Maya city.
And you have to understand just how far back this goes. I mean, look at this timeline. The very first E-groups show up way back in what's called the Middle Pre-Classic period, around 1000 BCE. That's hundreds and hundreds of years before the famous classic Maya cities like Tikal even hit their stride. This design is ancient. It is foundational to what it meant to be Maya.
And as some of the top archaeologists in the field, Arlen Chase, Ann Dowd, and David Friedel put it, as the first shared form of Maya public architecture, E-groups must have been important. Think about that. This wasn't just another type of building, it was the original plan, the first design that communities all across the Maya world agreed was absolutely essential to build a proper town.
And here's a really great way to think about it. Those same researchers suggest we should see them less like an observatory and more like New England town greens. You know that shared public plaza, the open space in the middle of a new town where everything happened, where civic life and ceremonies could unfold? It was literally the heart of the community.
But of course, these central plazas didn't stay as simple community gathering spots for long. They quickly evolved into the main stage where Maya rulers would perform and project their power.
On a cosmic level, the E group was seen as the Mishik Balam, which means the navel of the world. It was the sacred center point, the axis that connected the human community to the heavens above and the underworld below. Building one of these was like planting a cosmic flag, turning a random patch of jungle into an ordered, sacred Maya place. And because it was the sacred center, it naturally became the center of power. I mean, it makes sense, right? This is where rulers put up the first big stone monuments, the stelae, that told their life stories. It's where they buried their most important ancestors in these incredible tombs. The E group itself became a symbol of a dynasty's right to rule. It was the stage where a new king could perform rituals that tied his own power directly to the gods and the sacred calendar.
Even the little details of the architecture were all about screaming power. Take the roof comb, that big decorative wall on top of a temple. Symbolically, it was like a giant fancy headdress for the building itself, just like the elaborate ones worn by Maya kings. It was basically a giant advertisement, broadcasting the might and the divine connection of the ruler to every single person standing in that plaza below.
So, what's the ultimate legacy of this incredible architectural vision? Well, it's about so much more than one building. It's about building an entire cosmos, right from the ground up.
You can really think of the E group as the architectural DNA for Maya civilization. It was this one powerful blueprint that did everything. It organized society around a central hub, it anchored the community in time with its symbolic calendar, and it forged that all-important sacred connection to the cosmos. But building a cosmos is a massive undertaking, and it comes with a massive cost.
Which brings us to this single number, 20. What could that possibly represent? Well, it represents the hidden cost, the huge environmental bill that came with this incredible architectural vision.
Here's the jaw-dropper. It took 20 large trees, all burned down, just to produce enough lime plaster to cover one single square meter of a temple. Now stop and imagine the thousands upon thousands of square meters covering the giant pyramids and plazas in a city like Tikal. This grand cosmic construction required a staggering amount of wood, and it led to widespread deforestation.
And that brings us to our final question. The E group was the blueprint that allowed the Maya to build their cosmos in stone, to create some of the most spectacular cities the ancient world has ever seen. But in reaching for the heavens, it seems their greatest achievement might have held the seeds of their own collapse. So what was the ultimate cost of that sacred blueprint?
If you loved this video you just watched, please consider to like, share, and subscribe.